right, hi everyone. So we'll be talking about drones, which may or may not have been a topic of discussion for the past 2 years already, but for good reasons, because, well, they are everywhere. And although they are not a novelty in themselves, there's something different, and we will see it since 2022. And this is, in my assessment, for two main reasons. First, the massification of their use. You will see them everywhere in every kind of unit, are not just restricted to a very specific role in the Ukrainian military or just the military in general. And the second part of it is that there's a sort of maturity that has been attained, and I'm not talking specifically about the technical maturity, although this is part of the reason, but a maturity in terms of its employment on the battlefield. And that is linked to the fact that, well, you will have a lot of units that are infantry or tank or artillery, all using drone units within their own structure to leverage and improve their capability by themselves and not relying into combined arms. Also, this is very important too. Now, talking about massification, it's talking about figures and numbers of drones being used on the battlefield. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll be talking mostly about the small kind of drones, UAS, UAV, and it will be about the quadcopters, the FPVs, and those are slightly bigger. And in terms of numbers, very recently, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine was capable of building up to 4 million drones per year, with 1.5 being already contracted. And this is an increase from last year's goal, which was about 1 million a year. Now, the interesting thing is that the million figure does track with what we can see at the lowest echelon in terms of smallest unit you can find, the drone team. And in an interview done by the commander of the Terra unit, drone unit, which is part of the 3rd Assault Brigade, in early 2024, they said that they would be using up to 30 drones per day in their missions. And that was during the peak of the fighting during the Advivka battle. And when you do a little bit of estimate, raw estimate, I will admit, you reach a figure that will be, well, considering there's an X amount of drone team in the entirety of the Ukrainian army, will definitely about 1 million, if not more, drones consumed per year at this rate. And this contrasts with another figure that he also gave that was during the later stage of the Battle of Bakhmut, which was a dozen of UAV per day. So you see how much it has increased in less than a year. So now the key of success of drones, they come down to really how easy of access they are as a weapon system, flexibility of type of mission, reliability, obviously if they are properly built, and I'm not talking specifically about high-end state-of-the-art drones, but also the fact that, well, they are built for a very precise mission. They have known limitation, but they are reliable in that mission. And this matters a lot. But assuming they are properly built, they are reliable. You know what kind of amount of drones you'll need to take down a tank or an AV or any sort of, again, mission that you can think of. They are expandable. They are fairly low-cost weapons in general. And when properly used, so properly built, properly used by a skilled drone team, and also employed by a commander that knows how to combine it with its other units, they will be cost-effective weapon and will leverage their capability on the battlefield. And there's a lot of caveats, as you can guess. Now, in this video from the 47 Mechanized Brigade, you do see a drone that keeps visual on an armored Russian column. You see a FPV strike, and after that, you see an artillery strike. So you see 3 different types of mission and 1 camera footage that provide a feedback on what is happening, what's any correction that might be done, and what could be the next mission that you need to task either your FPV team, your drone team, or just your regular traditional soldiers. And that comes back to the idea that what drones, this small drone team have on contrasting to any other sort of unit force themselves, is the fact that they can do ISR and fire support organically, inherently, because drone teams, they don't just do ISR nowadays. They will do also FPV missions. So they will do reconnaissance, observation. They'll find a target, and immediately within the team, they'll be able to request a strike, and they don't need to go with the more traditional relay of information and communication system. So that provides a very quick reaction force, a very really quick and flexible way to deal with what's coming up on the battlefield. And that this also being why they are so useful for defensive purposes. And they will not replace artillery. This has been talked quite a lot about, is X weapon system irrelevant nowadays or not? It's too early anyway to judge that, but also specifically artillery and drones, they might have missions that intertwine, but sometimes you just need the small ordnance that drones carry. So it's about a few 100 grams, a kilo maybe, of explosive to get rid of a very specific target, very precise. And you don't need the firepower of a 155 shells, really. But at the same time, 155 shells, they have the explosive power that you need to get rid of bigger objectives. Now, in this video of the 47 also, you see a Bradley shooting its TOW missile on a Russian MBT. Now, the reason why I'm showing this video in particular is because of the thermal camera here, which is also something that Ukrainian soldiers request massively, the ability to have thermal camera installed on their drones, because it does make a significant difference in their ability to constantly surveil the battlefield and making sure that any sort of traditional concealment is not against, your typical camera is not enough to trick their ISR capability. So having thermal system that allows them more flexibility for both day and night operation and low traditional visibility environment. And also because of the fact that, well, they are high in the air, they will not require a human operator in the air also with the drone. That means you rely less on infantry reconnaissance and vehicle reconnaissance, which means you do not expose your soldiers and your vehicles. Usually they can be quite expensive, and especially also they're quite well trained when it comes to infantry squad that are supposed to do tasks with reconnaissance missions. So low risk, most of the mission typically covered, but sometimes you still need to rely on more traditional means. I'll come back on that in the challenge section. And just in general, you do have the ability to improve your C2, your command and control, and the fact that, well, you do share either, you will see footage of HQ, headquarters of companies or battalion sharing footage through Discord or Google Meet with a whole lot of different units that will be able to keep track on what's happening. And so this is a good way to simplify, unify what everyone sees, and you still do see quite a lot. Now, again, reason of the success of drones comes back really for their flexibility and in the fact that sometimes you don't necessarily need a different hardware to conduct several types of missions. And that will be, as we talked about ISR, obviously, fire support, that comes in different variety. That will be just the bombing, and you can have an ISR drone that will do observation, a quadcopter typically, that will stay in the air. You see an enemy infantry squad, you decide to drop couple grenades on them. So you can do several missions at once. And this ability also to correct fire, whether they are mortar support or artillery. And what we've seen also develop quite a bit the past few months is the air-to-air interceptions. So Ukrainians are using small drones to intercept here. It's a Lancet drone, but they will intercept Zala and Orlan also. And there have been attempts to do air-to-air interception a year ago and even earlier, but they were more diverse in their method, not necessarily in just one single way. Now, what we see is there's definitely an acceleration, and we're not in the infancy of air-to-air interception of drones, but more in a maturity stage, or maturing stage, should I say. And that's shown by the amount of footage that we can see, dozens, if not hundreds already, of this kind of interception. The last picture here is also the termite drone that you probably have seen, dragon drone, supposed very simply to burn to the ground a tree line, and tree lines are key parts of your entire defense in Ukraine. So that is quite efficient in its job. Now, also an additional benefit of drones, the way they've been organized and used, and just to give you an idea, typically it's hard to talk about Ukrainian armed force when you say typically, because there are large differences between one brigade to the other, but ideally you will find drone team within each of the constitutive battalion of a brigade. So you'll have, let's say, drone teams in your mechanized infantry battalion, but also in your tank battalion and your artillery battalion. And then you have a dedicated company level or battalion level UAV team group, and they will be directly under the command of the brigade, and they will be there to reinforce and provide support, and whether they are for offensive or defensive means, really. Now, in terms of logistical burden, drone teams don't need as much as your typical traditional fire support arms, whether they are motor or artillery. Artillery is typically one of the heaviest burden on your logistical chain. But when it comes to drone, it's not that heavy. It's fairly light compared to that. Typically, they would drone team will rely on mobility vehicles, small ones. Unfortunately, sometimes they have to rely on civilian vehicle because there's just not enough in Ukraine. But that does make them quite exposed and vulnerable to other enemy drones, and also artillery strikes. So ideally, they prefer vehicles like MVs, typically. Also, UAV team are fairly easy to conceal. They can conceal in buildings. They can conceal underground. You can put them in a forest, in trenches. There are ways to conceal them that makes them not so easy to spot and counter battery them. Now, in additional use, you'll find mine laying, mine clearing. Ukraine is heavily mined, so this is a very important use of drones. Something we've seen also is the ability to guide surrendering soldiers. And the reason I also wanted to mention that is because I think we should assume that in the future, surrendering soldiers might see drone, and instinctively, because they know there is a camera and someone looking at them, they might instinctively, surrender to a drone. So we will have to think about ways to organize contingency plan to evacuate the surrendering soldiers. Now, obviously, last but not least, the ability to do strategic communication. Ukrainian brigades and units, they need fund, they need more support. So the ability to expose themselves, show to an audience, cultivate an audience, PR branding really, is critical for them to build more drones, to buy them, and to equip themselves with not just drones. Can be other equipment also, night vision goggles, for instance. Now, when it comes to the challenge, I'll play this short video here, which it's a shade. It's a bit outside of this the scope of this presentation, but it's the point of that video still remains the same: is that drones are not armored typically, so they will be vulnerable to any sort of caliber, even the small arms caliber. Now, there's not really pure dedicated counter UAS drone gun, but you will see like soldiers saying that shotguns typically are fairly reliable when it comes to get rid of drones, although they do require specific training, and you do need to adjust the way your infantry squad is structured, because you cannot just carry shotguns on top of carrying RPGs and more, etc. There's a limit to what you can carry. Now, drones are by themselves vulnerable to electronic warfare, and they will always be vulnerable. So now, an interesting aspect of that is it is partly mitigated in the case of Ukraine because they use such a diverse range of different systems, and that includes software, that whatever electronic warfare measure the Russians come up with may work against a given unit, may not work against their neighbor. So that does mitigate the efficiency of electronic warfare. Now, that diversity, while it is good by default against electronic warfare, it is a problem when it comes to scaling up production, because every unit has its own supply chain, every unit has its preference, its method. So how do you choose which system should be the default one? And the problem with that is also you may choose a system, but whatever you come up with, again, you choose may become quite obsolete fairly quickly, because, again, it's a race against jammers and detectors that goes very quickly. Whatever you create can be obsolete in the span of a few months, if not even weeks. So you need this ability to be flexible, and that innovation comes a lot from the bottom. And how do you manage this with production facilities, etc.? That this is a critical issue, as it does create supply chain weaknesses where you will have good companies that produce good drones. They will be extremely demanded, but they will not be able to provide that many drones to a new drone unit or just to complete different brigade. So they'll have to restrict access, and they don't necessarily find the fund to upscale their production themselves. So they have to sort of to create more exposure again and more PR to hopefully get more fun and then be able to upscale production. Thank you very much, and I do hope this was an insightful presentation. If we have any time left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have time for one short answer, for one short question. Some say that drones are a weapon of poor countries. What is your take on the drone relevance as a weapon in the upcoming decade?
And saying that drones are the weapon of poor countries is something that seems to be proven wrong by what rich countries are doing. If you look at, for instance, the French armed forces, they are very much taking the lessons of Ukraine and setting up drones for the infantry squads, platoons, companies. Then you change the range to medium range drone for regiment and brigade. And then beyond that, you have your long range strategic drones for deep strike and stuff like that. So, and I believe this is the same for a couple other countries like South Korea. They are looking to do the same sort of layered, inbuilt inside within the way the force structure is. Drone unit to support your infantry, drone unit to support your artillery, dedicated solely for that purpose. And then drone units separated that will be bringing reinforcement. Honestly, I think that drones are not going to replace any weapon system. They have a niche, very specific niche that they can do, and that multiplies, leverage the capability of whichever unit they are attached to.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Sorry. Thank you.